Hey everyone, this video is for architects and engineers who are learning Revit or have already learnt Revit and are already working as modelers inside companies. I wanted to speak to you guys about why learning Revit is not enough in 2024 and what to learn instead. So I believe, based on my experience, that 2024 onwards, so this year onwards, since there's going to be a shift in sort of the industry and how everything's working in terms of the construction industry and how it's all going to be digitally aligned, we have to be learning more than just Revit. So we have to be adding this additional skill, which I'm going to be talking about in this video. And what I'll do is I'll break down exactly the skills you need to learn and break them down so that you can just after this video go and start to learn them and then incorporate them so that you have maximum job security, right? So let's start off by just me showing you something that I found on the internet about the building information modeling market, so you know that I'm not just making this up. This is what I found on the internet about the BIM industry. So building information modeling market, from 2022 to 2023, there was a small jump from 7 billion to 8 billion. So that's like a $1 billion increase. But the market cap is going to be increasing from 8 billion all the way to 15 billion from 2023 onwards to 2028. So within 5 years, it's going to be a huge increase. And so this is a really good indication to show you guys that there's going to be a massive shift in the way that we do things as engineers and architects, right? Everything is going to start to be more digitally aligned rather than solving things on site. So they're going to take doing Revit and BIM, and that coordination skill set is going to take precedence way more now. Okay, so if you just look at this sort of, let me just increase the size of this and we try to see what this is over here. You can see that the North American market is increasing significantly. It's like nearly doubling. The European market is also nearly doubling. The Asia Pacific market is sort of doubling, and pretty much everything is going up a huge amount. So if you're in North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, like you need to be learning and adding this new skill set of BIM rather than just learning Revit, because it's not going to be enough, right? And so let me just bring this back to normal. I'm going to explain why the traditional method of acquiring skills of Revit is not enough. And if you really want to start out in 2020 as an architect or engineer, you need to be adding this additional skill. So the reason I say this is because of the insane growth that you're seeing above for BIM, right? And this is BIM, this is not Revit. Because a lot of people have a misunderstanding about what the difference is between BIM and Revit. They think if you learn Revit, you know BIM. Or if you, like, they think it's interchangeable. It's not really. BIM is more of a management tool or an environment that we use, and Revit is a tool that we use as part of that. So BIM is sort of like the umbrella term, and then you have Revit. So think of it like this, right? When you have Google, you have all these different applications. You have Google Docs, Slides, Sheets, but then you have Google as a company, right? Or like the concept behind the services they provide. So everything which is on the cloud, and then you have Google Sheets, PowerPoint, and then Google Docs, and you have all these small tools that we can use as a function of that main thing. So that's similar to BIM and Revit. So if you want to know how to future-proof your skills and take advantage of the new technology that's becoming mainstream, then I think this video is going to be really valuable to you. So I'm going to explain to you the specific BIM skills that you need to learn, so you can spend time learning them and you're not going to be considered just another modeler, right? You can add this to your resume. So this applies to you if you are currently an architect or an engineer and you are either learning Revit to get a job, so you're early on in your career, or using Revit on a day-to-day basis as a modeler or draftsperson, but you have that feeling that there's a whole bunch of BIM knowledge that you're missing out on, right? So I started working as a Revit draftsperson straight out after uni. Even while I was in uni, I was doing Revit drafting and AutoCAD and stuff like that. But within 6 months, I don't know about you, but for me, within 6 months, I sort of got over it. Like after 6 months, I learned so much. After that, there's like diminishing returns. Like you learn a lot within the first 6 months, and then after that, you start to think that you can do bigger things, better things, rather than just doing Revit modeling over and over again. And that was the position that I was in. And then I started to think to myself, okay, I need to learn the next skill set, which is coordination, BIM coordination. And I saw that a lot of people were doing Revit modeling for 5 years, 10 years into their career. And it's such a long time, and that's the only thing that they can do, because the companies are not oriented in a way to make them grow, because to grow, to learn, it costs money and it takes time in order for you to learn those things. But if you just know Revit, you can just do the same thing over again, right? If you know how to model doors, windows, create schedules, do door schedules, you can just do that over and over again for the next 5 to 10 years and then provide some value to the company. So it's not a company's incentive to actually make you trained. So that's sort of what I'm talking about here. If you have the feeling that there's a whole bunch of BIM knowledge that you're missing out on, I want you to know that you are correct and you can actually learn these BIM skills really quickly within a matter of months, right? And you can learn how to become a BIM coordinator. You can learn all the BIM skill sets, as in coordination, running clash detection, setting it up on the cloud, and all this stuff that your boss is probably doing. And you don't have to spend 5 years in your career. You can accelerate the process, right? And the reason I'm saying it's such a good time to do that now is because of this reason. It's because we're going to be doubling the BIM industry in the next 5 years. So I think it's really good. Personally, it seems to me that in a doubling industry, we're increasing our demand and there's already a shortage of skills. So the best thing you could do as an engineer or an architect is digitally align yourself. Learn these skills so that as time goes, you're fully future-proofed and you have job security, and then you can sort of pivot into any direction you want later, right? Because you're so skilled. So I talked about that there's going to be a huge demand for everything. And the reason for this is because of the AI revolutions, which is currently happening, right? So since AI is sort of becoming mainstream, technology is developing, BIM programs are more mainstream. So like, when you look at a BIM program, you'll see that you'll have different services inside the ceiling. Like you'll have ductwork, then you have architectural ceiling, you have lights. And the way that we do the clash detection is it's all automated. And in order to create that automated that clash detection software, the reason that they got so good is because technology is developing with this AI revolution. So that's the reason this is all becoming sort of mainstream. I have a pretty interesting story that one of the previous projects, or the most recent projects that I'm working on, one of the builders, who's the construction company, was telling the fire contractor that he's going to drag the fire contractor into the 21st century if he has to, because that fire contractor was working on AutoCAD instead of trying to get into Revit and then learn the BIM skill set and then get into like the BIM atmosphere. That because we're using BIM in order to coordinate that project. But the fire contractor wanted to use AutoCAD because that's how he had done it in the past. So the builder said that he wants to drag him into the 21st century. And so he really has no choice but to actually employ someone and learn with the BIM skill set. So for example, look at that, right? A company is in need for a guy that knows Revit and BIM. Now we actually have an issue because that fire contractor, which is an engineering fire contractor, doesn't actually have someone who knows the skill set in order to actually do the Revit. So do Revit and BIM coordination stuff. So if someone like you who learnt this stuff was making cold calls every single day and calling these people as an engineer or even as an architect, it's the same thing, and saying, hey, I know how to do Revit, I know how to do BIM, do you want me to help you? Then there's going to be a lot of companies that are in similar positions where they'll be like, yes, we do, because we can't find one right now. So that's just an anecdotal experience of me that I just literally heard last week, and it's a good example for you. I also have another example of this electrical contractor that I was talking to 3 weeks ago, and he was telling me how because he's an estimator, and so he has contacts with a lot of electrical contractors and companies, and he's telling me how a lot of people, small electrical companies, are calling him and saying, hey, what's Revit, what's BIM, and all this stuff, because the industry is shifting, and all the builders, the big construction companies, are telling even these small construction electrical contractors to start doing Revit and to start doing BIM, right? And to coordinate everything in the cloud. So like, there's no choice but to shift into that sort of skill set. So you need to have an understanding of not only Revit but BIM, because just knowing Revit is not going to be enough. So I'll give you an example, right? This is the sort of project that you'd be working on. So this is like a pavilion in front of like a sports stadium. This is my most recent project, which I'm working on. You'll see that you have everything sort of linked together. Like you'll see the oval here. You'll see some steel on the roof underneath there. You'll see the architectural design of that. You'll see some curtain walls on the front. And in this model, you're actually able to sort of open it and cut sections and see everything inside the ceiling. But the thing is, this isn't Revit, by the way. You can see these clouds look really realistic. This is not a fake image. This is real. This is not a real image. This is fake rather. But what I'm trying to say here is this is actually from a program which is a BIM tool, okay? So even though you might think all the coordination happens in Revit, it actually doesn't. The above image is actually from a program called Revit, which is completely different to Revit, and it's an example of a BIM tool. So modelers will model in Revit, they will upload this to Revit. The BIM coordinator will take all the models, put them together, make sure there's no clashes. That's the job of the BIM coordinator. And then he will produce or she will produce a model which looks like this so that everyone can have a look and see, and you can start to coordinate. That is sort of the main idea. So I've actually spoken to so many people who are making multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by just knowing how to operate all the BIM and Revit programs and how to integrate everything together and provide huge value to other businesses and construction companies. So it's actually ultimate job security from what I've seen if you know how to use Revit, because you have job security and there's high demand, right? Because you have a skill that is highly technical. So like, imagine you lost your job right now. What are the skills you have that make you that make you desirable to the next job or make you hard to fire right now? You can probably list one or two, but imagine you could list dozens of skills, right? Dozens of small niche BIM skills that are just sort of surfacing now and that need someone that's skilled. So if you have all those things under your belt, it becomes impossible for you to get fired, and you can always arbitrage and find new better opportunities. So if you learn BIM tools like Revit, BIM 360 and Navisworks, then you can definitely always keep job security and remain in high demand. So if you are a current Revit modeler and you just know Revit, you need to be learning these three skills. This is your starting point. Learn BIM 360, that's the main one. Start with that. Then learn Revit, which is sort of the industry shifting towards Revit because it's a pretty good program. And Navisworks, I'd say learn last, because Navisworks was popular a few years ago, not popular anymore because it's not really a cloud tool. So we don't really use it as much. The main thing I want you to understand is this is just a technical skill set, okay? You might think it takes 5-10 years to become a BIM manager, but if you think about it, what is a BIM manager? A BIM manager is a BIM coordinator who has knowledge about the industry, okay? The easiest way to get knowledge about the industry is by doing. The only way that you will do is if you become a BIM coordinator, because as a BIM coordinator, you deal with MEP, structural, architectural, speaking to everyone. So as a BIM coordinator, after 2 or 3 years, you would have gained the skill set of a BIM manager, and then you become a BIM manager, right? The path to BIM management is through BIM coordination. It's very simple. But if you only are doing Revit and you continue to do that for the next 3 years, you're only doing your own discipline. Like you're only doing architectural, right? And then you're not speaking, you're not making the decisions with MEP engineers or consultants. So you don't know what the decision-making process is. And because you don't know, you have no leverage because you don't learn every single day. You only do the architectural modeling, right? Sorry, I might have hit the mic here, but yeah, I have a quote which summarizes this well. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And this is sort of the thing which I've abided by most of the time, is I've always biased trying to learn skills, because I knew that if I just kept procrastinating and waiting until like my career would hand this to me and I would take time in order to learn the thing, I would get there, but I would get there much slower. So I don't want to take 20 years to learn the skills that I could have learned in 2 or 3, right? So that's what I've always been trying to do. I don't want to also change my job, right? Because when you start a job and you continue to do a job, you start to like the place, develop connections with people, and you like the routine you get into. You don't want to start shifting your job all of a sudden. Like I see a lot of people changing jobs every 2 or 3 years in order to go from job to job to job, just to get a pay rise or get into the opportunity where they can learn the skill set. But I think that's pretty sad that you'd have to do that if your company is not allowing you to grow. But if your company is not allowing you to grow, then the easiest way to do that is find someone or find some education online that will teach you these things, so you can stay in your current company but continue to provide more value. And as you provide more value, your salary will increase. So you will grow naturally in your company, but then you won't have to move every 2 years like everyone else does, right? Again, this is sort of like the quote which I come back to. Like, how do you get good at the BIM coordinator skill set if you are never given the opportunity to learn the skill set in the first place, right? So there has to be some sort of momentum that's going to be gathered. You have to start somewhere. So that's where learning the skill set through a simulated BIM environment, which someone can teach you online, or you go do the trial, try to do the simulated BIM environment using the sample projects given by Autodesk. If you try to do that for a while, then you will learn the skill set naturally so that you can actually start to help at your workplace, right? You actually have to take the leap and start to learn these skills fast or first, so you can start to become good at them, and you can refine them in the workplace. Because otherwise you're not even given the opportunity to be good at them, right? I'll give you an analogy of sales. Like imagine you owned you're the owner of a used car lot. Like you have a car lot of a bunch of used cars and you're recruiting a new 17-year-old or 18-year-old salesperson, brand new, right? If he walked through the door and he's going to start selling your cars, would you rather be more comfortable if he knew nothing about anything regarding sales, right? He just came in and he'd be like, I don't know anything. I'm just going to learn on the job as I go. You probably wouldn't feel comfortable because you know that there's 5 or 10 people that are going to walk in today that you could talk to and that you could sell the cars to because you're good at the thing or you have a basic understanding. But then that guy knows nothing and he's going to learn as he does the thing. So then you're not going to give him the job in the first place, right? However, if he had some simulated sales training with you, right? We said, okay, let's do some practice. Let's do some verbals back and forth and figure out if you're good at this sales stuff. And you gave him some pointers and some tips. Then what's going to happen? He's going to start talking to you and you're going to be able to correct him very quickly to the point where then he's going to start to be able to be at a much higher level because he knows the basics. And so now you're more comfortable with him going on the used car lot and then trying to sell people cars, right? So it's the same thing with your job, with your career and your boss. So you got to think about it in their perspective. For them to give you the responsibility to handle something which a BIM coordinator or a BIM manager does, they don't feel good doing that because they're giving something to someone that doesn't know how to do the thing, and also it takes time out of their day, and it's a lose-lose. It's probably a win for you. It's like lose for the boss, lose for the company because time goes, win for you because you might learn a skill. So then everyone's not selfless. Like people have their interests and the company's interests at best in mind, and they're not going to have your interests. So the best thing you can do is if you just learn the skill, you can tell your boss that you know how to do this one thing, go up to him or her and take some work off their plate. Then it becomes a win-win because you're making their job easier. They might get the credit for it. You learn the skill. You learn by applying. So now the company does better. You do better. Your boss does better. So it's like a win-win-win scenario. And the only way that's going to happen is if you learn this skill first so that you can start to progress in your career later. Okay? So learn the skill first and then you can start taking the opportunities you currently have at work in order to propel. So let me just give you an example of what BIM is, because a lot of people don't actually understand. So if you don't have any understanding at all, let me give you like a 2-minute explanation. If you understand what this is, you can probably skip. But before a building gets constructed in real life, we construct it virtually. So like through a computer. So like I said before, do you remember when we were up here and I talked about how there's different sort of components here, and there's the architectural, there's the steel, there's the ground, and it's all sort of linked perfectly. You can see everything in the correct order as if it's built on site. Well, that's the construction process that happens virtually. Think of it as a virtual simulated construction process that happens before the real design or the real construction process. So what we do is we take the design model, the structural model, the MEP model from like different architects, consultants, structural people, engineers, and we like combine them. The combination process and creating the environment, right, is the BIM coordinator's job. So I actually have the video to show you. If I showed you this, it would sort of make more sense. If you look at something like this, well, this is an example of a project which I've worked on. You see all the ductwork in the ceiling. You see, this is like the rooftop. You see the solar panels. You see, look, there's a clash between that like fan and the solar panel, and you can cut sections and you can drag everything down. And you can see sort of, you can see some steel beams over here. You can see that there's a light clashing with the ductwork. So you see all these things in the 3D model. And here's another example, right? This is just another sports pavilion that I have done. You can cut a section. You can see what's inside the ceiling. There's some steel over here. There's some ductwork. You want to make sure that none of it is clashing. So this is not all designed by the same person. This is designed by different people. Like the architect will make the outside exterior of this whole thing. There'll be a site architect that does the whole site design. Then there's going to be engineers that do like the inside, like a mechanical engineer. There's going to be fire. There's going to be pipe, like hydraulics engineers that does this pipe. There's going to be electrical engineers that put lights into the whole thing. So there's a combination of different people, and your job is to just create this design environment, this whole environment, and then look at each of the ceilings, inside the ceilings, to see, are there actually clashes? And if there's clashes, then what you can do is then you can assign these clashes to each of the people. So if you look at, for example, if you look at one of these examples over here, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of like a log on this left hand side. You can see the different clashes. It says answered, it says not answered. So you can actually assign, and if it's yellow, it means the issue is open. If it's blue, it means the issue is closed. So it means that you can actually track without sending emails. You can just tag this, put their name in. Since they've been added to the BIM 360 platform, they get a notification so that they can be like, okay, there's a clash here, let me go and resolve it, or let's reply back to the guy saying that I can't resolve it. So it's a whole coordination process, but you're setting up the infrastructure and managing the infrastructure by creating the clashes so that all the project team can actually coordinate with each other and coordinate with you so that you can actually get to the outcome, which is a clash-free virtual environment, so that you can actually go and do this stuff in person and build it. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. You're going to be one of these people, right? You're going to be an architect, civil engineer, MEP engineer, mechanical, electrical, hydraulics, one of those people. And so you'll have your own model. The BIM engineer will just combine them all together and tell each one of you to move your stuff. So we already talked about that. I showed you the Loom video. This is going to be the programs that I use every single day as a BIM coordinator. So these are the things that you probably need to learn as well. I'm pretty confident that if you learn these things, like 100%, you'll be leaps and bounds past what anyone else would be, and you would probably become a BIM coordinator, a BIM manager within the next couple of years, because you'll be able to actually start implementing this stuff at work and taking more responsibility, taking work off your manager's plate. So win-win scenario for everyone, right? And the company. So in Revit, if you learn how to set up projects, right, as an architect or engineer, setting up coordination views. So making sure that you can create different work sets. So create different work sets so that you have structural, architectural, MEP all separated on Revit so that you can then publish it to the cloud, okay? Everything for BIM 360 and coordination starts on Revit. You create the coordination views on Revit so that you can publish it to the cloud. And when you publish it to the cloud, it goes to, let's skip the second step, it goes to BIM 360. When it goes to BIM 360, you can then create your project collaboration workspace, which is just an environment on BIM 360, just like a Slack channel or whatever. It's not actually a Slack channel, but you can think of it like that because there's no other way for you to visualize it. Imagine a Slack channel where a Slack workspace where every single person has been added into it, or like a Teams chat where every single person has been added into it, and then you can all collaborate. Similar to like BIM 360 or Autodesk Construction Cloud, ACC. You're creating a collaboration workspace so that everyone has been added into it and everyone can see that everyone's in there. Then your job is to keep all the models and documents up to date and relevant, create coordination views on there so that everyone can start to see them, and add the correct permissions so that the fire guy can see and edit the fire things, the electrical guy can see and only edit the electrical things. And then you would run clash detections automatically. You would assign clashes to other services, and then you would resolve clashes through the BIM platform, okay? So once you set it up on Revit, you publish it to BIM 360, and if you're thinking about learning a bit more, you would learn Revit, which is an additional software that is sometimes used in the industry, but BIM 360 is sort of the bread and butter of what we use, okay? Navisworks is not used anymore, but you can use it to create views or check for clashes locally in your computer. So if it's like a small project, usually BIM 360 is expensive to set up. So what people will do is they'll just have a Navisworks license and they will just do like a small apartment building on their Navisworks, create a small view if they need to do coordination and solve it there. BIM 360 and Revit 2 becomes very good if we're working with large scale projects. So if you're in the commercial space, which is prisons, hospitals, all these big buildings, you'd probably use you would definitely use BIM 360 and Revit 2 and Revit. But if you're doing small houses and stuff like that, you might use Navisworks. But this is not really used anymore because everything is like cloud oriented now, okay? The reason we use Revit is because we can collaborate with everyone else. The way we collaborate is by pushing it to the cloud, and there has to be a coordination process. So that coordination process is the reason you need to learn Revit and BIM. Combine them together so that you're good for the future, okay? Does that make sense? Because that's the sort of thesis that I'm trying to present to you here. Every single time that I learn a new skill, it does all these things, right? It increases my leverage. So I can work on coordination tasks that are more valuable to the company than if I just did modeling. So if I was just modeling doors and windows and floors or like ductwork or lighting, it can get boring after 6 to 12 months because you don't really learn much after 6 months. You learn a lot about Revit, but then after the technical skill, what's the next step? The next step is coordination. So you can go to your boss at the end of the year and tell them you coordinated a few projects this year rather than modeling bits and pieces of projects. So this will be a better argument to ask for a promotion because you're literally making the company more money. So if you go to your boss and say, I coordinated this project and this project today, or I did this year, or I did this task and this task at the start of the year to coordinate this specific project you had. I ran a clash detection. Then your boss is going to be like, okay, you're learning new skills. It's very obvious that you're actually providing more value to the company. Let's give you a raise. But if you're just learning Revit and you're doing that every single day and you do that for 6 months and you go to your boss and say, can I have a raise? Like, why do you get a raise? You haven't learned anything new or you haven't provided more value to the company. So the way you provide more value to your company, or if you're working by yourself, the way that you charge more for the same service, right, is if you learn the BIM skill set, because it can be an addition to what you're doing as a engineer or an architect, right, doing BIM coordination. It opens up new paths in my career. So BIM management transition later on, since you already have the base skills. So you know, as a Revit modeler, you learn Revit coordination, you transition into BIM manager later on. It's it's the most logical and obvious path that will follow if you learn the BIM coordination skill set, because Revit plus BIM coordination equals BIM manager. If you try to go Revit to BIM manager, it won't work. You need to become a coordinator and then marry these two together in order to become a manager, right? So essentially, the quicker you become a BIM coordinator, the more time it takes for you to marinate, right? You can marinate quicker and then you can become a BIM manager quicker. So if you learn the skill set like in the next 2 months, your marination process starts within the next 2 months. And then within a couple of years, now you're a BIM manager, right? It's not hard. It's very simple. Freelancing, because you can work independently as an architect or engineer and understand exactly how to take on a whole entire project. You can approach a company and tell them you'll offer the whole project drafted and you will take care of the coordination aspect as well, right? So if you are an architect or an engineer and you're starting a freelancing company, let's just say you're an architect. If you want to do architecture or freelancing, most likely, unless you're working on Fiverr and they're sending you Revit models, they're going to be, if you're working big commercial projects and that's the company that you want to build, they're going to be telling you to work on the cloud. So telling you to work on the cloud and collaborate with the design team or like the modeling team and make sure that there's no clashes, you need to be able to understand how to use BIM, how everything is managed and coordinated so that you can be added. Otherwise, there's going to be a guy that does the coordination and you as the draftsperson. And then the draftsperson is, in the future, the draftsperson is not going to be needed. We need a modeler. We need a skilled BIM modeler, okay? So if you're a draftsperson, you need to switch to BIM modeling by learning the BIM skill set, okay? You can work on commercial projects rather than getting stuck on residential projects. So a lot of you guys are stuck just working residential projects and you want to sort of push into the bigger project space, but you need to understand the BIM toolset in order to go and start doing commercial projects. Because if you're doing a hospital, for example, they're going to add you to BIM 360 and they're going to send you messages and tell you, let's do this coordination process. And if you don't know how to use the BIM 360 toolset, and that means that they're not even going to let you sit in on meetings. So like, what's the transition? The transition is learning the skill set first. Increases my job security. So you're learning a skill set that's hard to replace, so it won't be easy to let go. And the demand is increasing rapidly, so you will have unlimited job opportunities, right? Think about if you got fired now, how many companies would you have lined up to pay you 170K a year? You'd probably be slept on because you don't have the complete skill set that you need in order for companies to come and start reaching out to you, right? You need the Revit skill set, the BIM skill set, some knowledge about MEP, some knowledge about structural, some knowledge about architectural, and you need to combine all these things in order for people to start going like, okay, this guy can be a coordinator, can be a manager, come into my company quickly. Like you need to start developing multidisciplinary thinking and also start to develop the coordination, management, BIM skill set. Revit is not enough, okay? So this also increases your salary in the job market. So personally, I get contacted by recruiters a few times a month asking if I want to get placed into a job for BIM coordination and drafting. I already have a job, they know that, but they just keep asking me because there's not any people, well, I'll give you an example from Australia. Like there's no one in Australia. They're finding it hard to find people in Australia that have this complete skill set because the demand is increasing, the skills are sort of staying the same. There's always been a skill shortage anyway. So there's not many people. So they're trying to poach people that are already existing in companies in order to place them in high companies, always giving them rises. But I say no because I found a good company which I like. But this is the sort of opportunity that you should be getting. And if you're not getting it, it means something is wrong. It means you need to learn the BIM skill set until you start to get into this sort of opportunity, right? So this is essentially what needs to happen. Like, you need to exert effort and lift a load with minimal effort. And the only way that happens is if you increase your leverage. And every single time you learn these skills, your leverage actually increases. So think about these skills which I talked about: Revit, Navisworks, BIM 360, Revit, and these sub skills which I sort of listed out here. Go and learn these skills. Every time you learn them, by the end of the time you've learnt everything, you will look like this. This is what your skill set will look like. You're highly leverageable. So now when you start working in a company, you're not just modeling, right? You're not modeling AutoCAD or Revit. You're doing BIM coordination. Or after some time, you're not doing BIM coordination, you're doing BIM management, right? And then after that, you can start moving into management, directing, project management, all this stuff. But the path is BIM coordination and learning the BIM 360 skill set. So I'm making this video because I know that this is a big block for a lot of you guys. And this is something that you're at a bottleneck, and you learn this BIM coordination skill set, and then everything unlocks and you have the path to do whatever you want. You just need to, like, however long it takes you to learn BIM coordination skill set is however long it takes you to unlock your path in your career. So learn it quickly now so that everything is unlocked and you can actually do the thing you want to do, which might be modeling, might be drafting, might be management. You need to start unlocking your pathway in order to get to those places, right? So the reason I'm saying this is because I talk about leverage, which is a business concept. But the reason I say that is because you can work 8 hours on modeling a house or modeling an apartment according to your work, and you might not learn much. But if you spend that same 8 hours, right, as a BIM coordinator, you're working on multiple different decision-making processes every single day. So me as a BIM coordinator, I will learn architectural, mechanical, electrical, siphonics, hydraulics, structural, all these different sub-services within the construction process that I will understand exactly what happens in each of these processes. So now I have a really good high-level understanding about what happens during the whole construction process. This gives me a really high leverage. So I'm increasing my knowledge base, but the only way that my knowledge base starts to increase is when I get into an opportunity where I'm actually exposing myself to these different services, different people, and coordinating. And the only way that happens is through becoming a BIM coordinator. So that makes you learn these you will start intuitively understanding standards and small things and regulations of different services over time very easily, and that makes your decision-making process much better in the construction industry. This is actually what sets out people that have successful careers and people that don't have successful careers. The people that have successful careers have found a way early on in their career into getting into opportunities where their exposure is high, like their knowledge exposure is high. So I'll give you an example. If you're working as a normal modeler, 8 hours of work is not much growth in your career because you just be doing door schedules for 8 hours or modeling like the northwest facade of the hospital for 8 hours, right? And it's just modeling. Like you're not like yes, if you like doing that, good, but I didn't like doing that after 6 months. It got boring. I maxed out my Revit knowledge. So like, what am I going to do next? Not much career growth, right? If I'm a BIM coordinator, now you're solving problems and dealing with all the services and making decisions every day, right? You learn so much about different processes every day. So 8 hours of work is a lot of career growth, because in that 8 hours, I'm learning about how MEP stuff works. I'm learning about different services like hydraulics, siphonics, electrical, and how to coordinate these things. And then I'm talking to the architect, I'm talking to the builder, I'm talking to the structural guy, I'm talking to the steel guy, trying to coordinate everything. At the same time, there's going to be some construction slab which is going to be poured on in 2 weeks. So I got to figure out how to send the penetrations in the correct time. But then at the same time, there's also going to be a crane dropping some, like there's so many different things that are happening at the same time that you start to figure out, okay, this is happening, that's happening, like what do I do now? And that means that you grow a lot in your career, because you're put into a position where you have to like learn and think and grow, rather than just sitting at your desk and modeling the northwest facade of a hospital for 8 hours, right? So that is the difference between people that don't really get far in their career. Nothing against people that want to do modeling for the rest of their life, but if you're watching if you're watching a video like this, I know that you want to actually grow very rapidly and increase your leverage. So the way that you increase your leverage is then by becoming a BIM coordinator or learning these skills, so that later on you can start to, you have a full set of technical skills that you can actually start to implement into anything you want in your career. Okay, so you either get paid to do some repetitive task, or you get paid to learn. So those are the two options you have. And yeah, hopefully this video helped. I actually have made a main video. It's linked down below, and it goes through my whole process of how I became a BIM coordinator within 6 months, and also how to start freelancing. If you're interested in that, it's the first link down below. I created that video yesterday, and it's a complete breakdown of how you can implement the exact same strategy and also become a BIM coordinator as quick as possible, because we know that BIM coordination is the future, not just becoming a normal modeler and learning Revit. Like, you need to learn the BIM skill set. So if you're interested in that, click that link, click that free BIM training. And yeah, it'll provide you a ton of value. I'll see you guys in the next video.